Some brands are legendary. In every category, someone sets the standard, and some companies create raving fans. Join Scott Wozniak and Caitlin Johnson of Swaz Consulting as we dig into the tactics and tools behind great organizations. How did the legends do it? And how can you become a legendary brand too? My guest this week is Daniel Steere, CEO of Steering Ventures. If you are a follower of my personal podcast, Play the Long Game, then you have known this guy and heard some of the adventures we've been on. But this is the first time I've had Daniel on the Swaz Consulting podcast. And Caitlin and I are excited about this. Daniel and I have lots of adventures to tell. We've been friends together for almost 30 years now. And so that's why there's a lot of life that we can talk about, which if you've not checked out my other podcast, that's its focus. It's more on the individual journey. How do I build a legendary life? This podcast, where Caitlin and I dig into how do we build a legendary organization? Well, Daniel is also really good at this. In fact, this is what a lot of the journey Daniel and I have been on, is working with each other on these projects. Daniel's expertise is helping CEOs flourish. He does coaching, executive consulting, assessments, strategy work. In fact, he has worked on a bunch of projects with us at Swaz Consulting. I brought him in as an expert many times. He's brought me in for some of his projects. We do a lot of collaboration. There's so much overlap. And I think you're really going to enjoy how Daniel thinks about customers and legendary brands. Join me for a great conversation as Caitlin and I dig in with Daniel Steere. Daniel, thanks for joining us on the session. I'm excited to dig into this with you, man. It's been a fun ride.
Of course. I'm honored to be here and always excited to have a conversation.
Yeah. So let me just maybe add something. You guys just heard the official bio, but in addition to all the cool consulting stuff he's done, Daniel has been on my other podcast. So if you want to check out my personal podcast about kind of individual growth and building your life instead of building a company, that's what this one is. And check out Play the Long Game with Scott Wozniak. And Daniel and I have done, I think, 2 different conversations, having some fun over there. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to get into any of that today. What I want to get into is some of the stuff you've done with me over the years in terms of building great customer experiences and great brands. Because, well, I mean, guys, think about it. If you had a friend like Daniel Steere and you have client projects, come on, you know what I do all the time. I'm like, and Daniel, hey, can you join me and help me on this project? So I've worked for him. He's worked for me. We've had a lot of fun over the last 25 years building companies together.
I feel like that's kind of how every one of our coaching sessions ends. He's like, I've got all these deals and I just need some help, but I don't know who to ask. And I'm like, okay, I'll help. That's fine. I've got you.
Do you know anybody who does this kind of work, Daniel? Huh? Yeah, I'm subtle. See, I'm subtle and sneaky. It's these sneaky skills.
But I keep saying yes, so it's clearly working for both.
It's working, right? It's working. So, last year, I don't know, about 5-6 months ago, we were with a client, mm-hmm. and they were talking about they want to talk about operational excellence and building some of their service moments. And I remember you like threw your hand up and like, hold up. Before we get to that, we have to talk about mapping your customer journey. And they're like, what? Mm-hmm. Where they were happening? I think they were a construction company. They did both a residential division, but also big commercial projects. So a lot of different variety, but I mean, holes in the ground, deep foundations, metal bars. I mean, you're tactical. They're like, what do you mean a map? So you drew this thing out and talked about mapping the customer journey, and it unlocked a lot of the chaos or the random ideas they had and put a frame around all of it. So would you, I'm going to put you on the spot. Would you share what you mapped out for them? And then let's talk about how we use this with clients. Because I think it is a lot of folks who do this. They get their ideas, they get all excited, and they don't know where to start or how to organize or prioritize. And I think this unlocks a lot of things for people.
Oh, no, don't put me on the spot again.
I know. I've never done this before, by the way. I've never before grabbed him, stuck him in front of people and said, hey, talk about this thing.
Tell them about this. I love
hang on. Let's be fair. He started it, right? So Kate,
I totally did.
25 years ago, but this has nothing to do with leadership, but I've got to go here. We went to our friend Brian Davidson's wedding. Brian, if you're listening to this, Brian's a baller, right? Brian's this brilliant financial mind. He's the CFO of a big firm right now. All this cool stuff. Well, Brian's getting married. And so Daniel and I show up at the wedding. We know him because we work together, but we in a different state. We hadn't met his bride yet or any of that stuff.
Or
So
anyone except the groom. We knew one person.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So, and we're close enough with him and just audaciously dumb enough that we show up to the rehearsal dinner. We were invited to the rehearsal Thank you. We
dinner.
didn't crash it. He's like, you're going to be in town anyway, because we're coming in from out of town. He's like, come on over to the dinner. It'll be great. But we didn't know anybody. Right. So they rehearsal dinners, they go around and tell stories. Like, I'll tell stories.
Sure.
So Daniel and I had a road trip to get there. We might have been kind of whipping each other up, egging each other on. So Daniel, we get in there, we roll into this place and we get there. And Daniel's like, I got a story to tell. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, tell us how you know Brian. And so Daniel gets the mic and then he looks at me. I'll never forget the evil twinkle in your eye when you're like, oh, this is going to be good. And he proceeds to make up a completely false story about this guy saving this poor kid who broke his leg, little Timmy and his broken leg. And
oh my goodness.
And halfway into this story that didn't happen, Dan just like, well, Scott, why don't you tell him the next part, and hands me the mic. You're still getting paid back for that. I'm just saying.
25 years later. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You started it.
That is a completely true story.
Yeah. Yeah. Which by the end, is true. Daniel had a tear rolling down his cheek, and I'm literally on top of Daniel's back while he's crying about it. It was bananas. I think we killed it, by the way. And little Timmy sends his regards, by the way. He's doing really well these days. So
he is. His rehab's gone really, really well for him.
Yeah.
I really wish iPhones and recordings were available back then.
Well, we are so glad we did not grow up with people recording the shenanigans we did. Oh man, that's
Scott and I have a word for that. It is called mutually assured destruction.
Yes.
I could start that nuclear war, but nobody
I'll
wins.
finish it, and vice versa. Yeah, like this, nobody wins if we go all there.
Nobody wins. There's only losers.
Okay,
right, so let's get back on topic.
Yeah.
All right. So I love the engine, and I love the focus first on knowing your customers, customer insights, understanding your customer, and then segueing into operational excellence. I think the segue there between those two engines is what I would call the customer journey, which is what's the experience you want your customer to have across all the different interactions and touch points between you, your firm, and them. And that sounds very, relatively easy to say, but I think that the deeper you dig into that, the more you begin to realize that can be a very complex answer depending on who you're talking about. And so with this particular client, we were really just talking about the buyer journey, because the buyer was, in this case, usually the payer and also the receiver of the services.
Right? Yeah, this was
the
residential focus in this case.
It's a residential focus, right? So the buyer, the payer, and the user are all the same persons, and so we could just think about their journey. And we jumped really quickly into just like a very simple personality profile, like a DISC, and began talking about what does your standard sales process feel like to a high D buyer? How does that feel to a high S buyer or a high C buyer? And they pretty quickly began to realize that they had designed a process that was going to be awesome for a high D, but was probably going to make other personality types uncomfortable. Yeah. And then they wondered why they were only closing a certain percentage of their deals.
Which, by the way, not coincidentally, the founder and CEO was high D. His right-hand president was high D. Most of their team,
they were talking to themselves. Like, this is what I would want.
Right. This is how I would want somebody to sell to me. And what I found working with clients is that they're absolutely right. They can design a process for the people like them to buy. And then they get 10, 20% share, and they're just like, all the rest of them just don't get it. And it's like, that's probably not fair, right? It's probably not the fact that they don't get it. It's just that you've designed your processes, your experiences for a certain segment of the population unconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to consciously choose, you would either be comfortable with the 20% market share you've got, or you could perhaps develop some alternate paths, some alternate experiences, or what we end up doing with this one client is kind of starting down a path that the first 3 steps or 4 steps are the same for everyone. But then there's these decision points, these forks in the road where it's like, okay, if at this point the person starts asking technical questions, we're probably dealing with an S or a C. And now we need to shift and we need to run that play.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's a high D person, I've judged you in the first 20 seconds, whether you're competent or not. And if we're still talking, it's because I think I respect you. And if I don't respect you, we're not talking. So now we're still on this path, right? And understanding even just the basic differences between something like personality types can have a huge impact on the effectiveness of your operational excellence.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the process, it's who you're designing the process for.
100%. So let's pause and not assume that everyone knows the DISC frame. And there's a bunch of other ones, but I love DISC for this setting really well. So I'm a personality assessment nerd. I think all 3 of us have taken more than our fair share.
Junkie is the technical term. You're a junkie.
Listen,
Junkie.
I could quit anytime I wanted, Daniel. I just don't want to quit. I literally take at least one new one every year. It's for the clients. I'm researching. But DISC is not the most precise or nuanced. But that is precisely why I love it for these situations, is because its simplicity allows it to be kind of easily applied as a testing ground. So, but let's not assume everyone else is in the same, Personality Assessments Anonymous group that the 3 of us are in. Daniel, can you unpack just a short version of DISC and what the different types are, and that kind of just gives us a way of thinking a little more specifically here?
Yeah, so I'll nerd out for a second with you because I'm also a junkie. The way that I think about it, the simplest way is to think about it kind of in a 2x2 graph, right? Mm-hmm. Think people versus tasks, introvert versus extrovert.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you are an extrovert, task-oriented person, you would be high D in the DISC. If you are an extrovert but people-oriented, you would be a high I. If you are high people but introvert, you would be an S. Mm-hmm. And then if you are task-oriented but introvert, you would be a C.
Yeah. And so they give them names like dominant, influencer, steady, and compliance, or as I like to call them, cranky, the standard
right.
stuff.
Yeah.
Listen, I actually have a moderate amount of C, so there's a self-poking there.
Right.
By the way, all C's right now are getting upset. This is my legit poke on C's. All high C's are like, dude, you can't put me in a box. Like, I'm too precise. Right. And ironically, every one of you who's like reacting strongly, like, you can't label me and I'm too new. That's actually a predictable high C trait. Because yes, everybody is nuanced and different, and C's like precision and details and excellence, and the nuances matter to them. And then you swing up to the other end, D's on the opposite corner. Well, actually, they're not opposite corner, but the opposite spectrum. No. Of that. They're like detail, schmetail, let's go fast. So you start getting some fun stuff here.
I've heard it said once that D's want to be the most powerful person in the room.
Ooh.
I's want to be the most popular person in the room.
Yes. Yeah.
C's want to be the most intelligent person in the room. And S's just want people in the room.
Yes. They're so relational and non-confrontational. It's like, why can't we just all connect and get along?
Right.
Yeah.
As long as there's people in the room and I'm not the center of attention, I'm in my happy place.
Yes. Yes.
Clearly, Scott and I have none of that.
Yeah, I read a book about those people once. It's strange. It was strange. No, I actually married someone who's like 100% S on the scale. Like you can't get more S. And I literally have 0 S on the scale. And now you know what all our marriage therapy and conflicts are about. So welcome to my life.
But to bring it back to the client though, right? Think about that from a sales process, right? If you're selling to somebody who's a high D, that high D has sized you up in the 5 seconds it takes for you to get from the car to the front door.
Right.
And I've made a decision about you, and I'm 99% sure I'm already right. I don't want to talk about the details. I don't want to read a 12-page contract. I want to know that you know what you're doing. I might want to see a couple of references. I might want to see, some examples of your work. I want to see a price, and I'm going to make a call. And if I don't like it, I'm going to tell you. Be like, no, we're not doing this, right? Think about that compared to somebody who's like a high C, right? A high C is introvert task. They want to know every detail. They want to know what is the, they actually gave me an example. They said something like, what gauge of iron do you use in your rebar? Yeah. And I was like, oh, you think that, guys? I would never even think to ask that question.
They're proud that they know you use rebar. They're proud to show off they know that there are different gauges, and they want to nerd out and have you be like, oh, wow, you really know your stuff, man. Like you really get rebar, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Catch them.
Whereas like the S and the I, they just want to have a good time with you. Like they want to get to know you personally. They want to invite you in for a cup of coffee. And they want to hear about your mom and them and just really build that relationship. And so you can start to see how a process that's designed for one and very effective with one could be really off-putting to another. Yeah. Like to a high D, I don't care about your mom. Like, I don't want to become your best friend. I want you to do the job and get it done and get it over with.
And quit showing me pictures of rebar and stats, like for the love.
Right.
Are we going to do this or not? Yeah.
Right.
Whereas this, like, how do you expect me to make a decision on the spot? Like I got to go read this and maybe check 23 reviews out. Like you can't just pick a partner. Like the off-put is a fundamental thing. And okay, so this, what you've really done is you've combined two things really interestingly, and they're not highly complicated, but I loved what you did with them. What you did was you got on their whiteboard. We were in their boardroom, and you drew out the customer journey. You said, okay, like first heard about you, like an ad or a friend, and you mapped out this linear touch points, and then you did a parallel version of it and said, okay, what is the high D start? Where does he want? And this is where you forked the road. It was a map on a whiteboard on the, their office thing that mapped out like, here are the things. And at this point they want to have a long conversation and he doesn't. Right. And the journey was visualized. It was really interesting. So, okay. Give us some examples of what goes on that journey map, like early stage, mid stage. And I know we've got a variety of different companies that listen here. So maybe give us 2 or 3 kind of variations. What's early stage journey look like? How early do you start mapping this? What are the kinds of points we look at throughout this? So
yeah, there may be some standard out there that I'm not aware of. I was kind of winging it during that conversation. And so I was just using what I knew of their touch points, right? I would think that you could begin to tailor your approach to the customer as soon as you really start having meaningful interactions. But I think there's also a lot that can be done in the early design phase of kind of who is my customer? Like, what's the kind of person that is going to buy my product or service. And now this was not true for that company because they were kind of a home services company. And so, everybody has a broken pipe, everybody has a water heater, everybody has a problem. So they weren't able to kind of segment the market in that way. But that's not true for a lot of companies. There's a lot of companies that just by nature of what you make, buy, sell, deliver, you can make some assumptions, and you're not going to be 100% right. But think about a car, right? The kind of person who buys a BMW is very different than the kind of person who buys a Honda. Now, 100% of the time, probably not, but 90% of the time, I bet you there's probably some similarities there. And so depending on the kinds of products and services that you offer, it's worth thinking through who are the kind of people that are going to be interested in my product and what kind of experience do they want to have?
Yeah.
Because you can design a product that people want, but if they don't enjoy the experience of buying from you, you're not going to get a whole lot of sales.
Yeah.
Like you've got to build that process as a process that they enjoy the experience of.
And they have to match, right? It all has to feel. So maybe another more extreme example triggered in my head when you said that, Daniel, was a Harley Davidson buyer versus a Volvo buyer.
Ooh, good one. Yeah.
And because, Honda and BMW are different, but they're where you want to go, extreme difference. I mean, the Harley dealer, the way Harley emails, the whole package of the process, how they talk to you, what it looks like. And by the way, I would just say this, I don't have a Harley, but man, if you've not been to one of their dealerships, like I just highly recommend to everybody, especially in the last 6-7 years, this podcast is being recorded in 2024. They just started doing the last handful of years some really creative things in their dealership. If you're interested in customer experience, just go poke your head in and see what the experience is like. And then go to a Volvo dealership, which is also doing a good job at this time of this recording.
Yeah.
And boy, you will see it's a very different experience. And they both sell vehicles to customers through dealerships. That's a very maybe vivid example of like, it's not just the product fits your customer, the whole thing fits this feels like my place, my people, my setup.
All right. So you put me on the spot. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Scott, who's somebody that made a product or a service that the buying experience was like, this was for me. Like, these are my people.
Yeah. Man.
And if you need a second, I've got one. If you need a second.
Yeah, because I'm even thinking.
You go first, and then I go for it.
Okay. So I just bought a Whoop band.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's a health and fitness tracker. I've played with a couple of these. I've got an Apple Watch. I tried the Oura Ring. Several of my friends had this. And so I've known about it for a while. What got me was they offered a 30-day free trial. They said, try it. And if you don't like it, you can send it back on us. I'm like, heck yeah, I'd take that. Now, it's an expensive thing. Like I think it's like a $300 item.
Yeah.
And so it's not a small price tag on it, but they knew that for me, getting over that hump was going to be the hardest part. So they're like, we'll send you one for free. And if you still have it after 30 days, we'll start billing your credit card. Like, great. Put it on, pull up the app, and the experience is just very well tailored to the kind of person I am. They're like, hey, what kind of goals do you have? Why are you wearing this? What kinds of exercises do you normally do? Are you vegan, paleo, low carb, intermittent fasting kind of person? Like they were speaking my language, and I was like, oh, they get me.
Yeah. Let me just say, if you guys don't know, Daniel has goals, charts, and he's been doing this manually for years. I have seen his self-mapped charts on his Excel spreadsheets.
This is mutually
mutually assured distraction. Sorry. Cut that part.
Don't
Daniel,
start
this is
the war,
fascinating.
Scott.
I'm totally surprised that you're into goals and tracking. I can't believe it.
Uh, but the whole experience was really well designed. It was very intuitive. It tied in a lot of the things that I was already doing. And it's like, what are the things that are important to you to track on a daily basis? I'm like, I've already got a daily tracker. This is awesome. This, and this. And so by the end of it, I just felt very understood. I felt like this is the kind of product and service that's going to fit very naturally into my life. There's still more I need to learn, but they got me. Like they get me and who I am and why I'm wearing this. And as a result, I think they've got a new customer.
That's a perfect example of like, we know who our people are. We know it's not just the thing, it's the way we talk about it. It's the stuff that comes with it, from the financial structure of the deal to like, would I try it or not? I'll test it myself. Yeah, that's a really good example.
Even to the interface, like they know that I'm the kind of person who is going to be influenced by these kinds of products and services.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They've probably got a pretty good handle on the type of shoes that I wear, the kind of car that I drive, the type of books that I read, the podcasts that I listen to. I find that to be a really fascinating exercise to go through with a client and just say, all right, tell me about your ideal client, right? In marketing vernacular, this is called your ICP, your ideal customer profile.
Yep.
And then just ask them, what kind of car do they drive? What kind of podcast do they listen to? What do they do on the weekends? Are they like going to the mountains and going climbing? Are they stuck in a gym watching their kids' basketball game? Like, unpack that person's life for me. Tell me about the kind of restaurants they like to eat at. And the companies that do this well and that really understand their customers can nail that experience. And it's that intersection between the customer insight and the operational excellence. So they design a journey that is made for people to feel understood and feel like it was really created for me.
Yeah, I love this. And I'll jump in with my example. But the reason I hesitated was because something came immediately to mind, but it was an anti-example. And I'm like, I
might still be good though.
But it didn't work. And it's funny because they almost ruined the deal, and they had a great product and they didn't set it up or follow it up well. And so so you got to know I love skiing. One of the things I've done at least once a year is I'll take my family ski trip. I'll go with my guys and do adventures. Maybe it's because I spent most of my growing up years in South Florida where it's hot and flat that my all-time favorite activity is to get up in the mountains with the snow. So love it. And okay. We just did a ski trip. I'm not going to name the resort. I don't want to because I'm doing a bad example here, but we went, my family, just 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, to the ski resort, and we got a ski in, ski out property, like a townhome right on the resort. I've got 4 kids. It's lots of gear, trying to get in and out. And with the range of kids, some of my kids are like, we want to go at 9 a.m. Like, hit it. Some of my kids are like, it's vacation. Let's sleep in. And so like the ability to we've just learned over the years, we will pay the extra money to be in a place where people can walk on and off from the base of the lift so that we don't all have to come and go at the same time. It just wrecks the trip for us if we, one of my daughters is like, I'm just tired, I want to go back. And the rest of us are like, no. So we paid for it's most expensive part of the whole trip for us is the location. And it's a really big deal. We picked the location and get it right. So this resort had a bunch of townhomes right at the base of the mountain, maybe a 200-300 yard walk back and forth, perfect setup, right? So I did a bunch of homework, phone calls, looked online, booked the thing. We're coming like this is the elite, high touch, high end. We are serious skiers who will come back great places. We're the customer you want to make a big deal out of, and we've paid extra money for the premium property. And dude, I could not find any email from them that gave me a reminder, or I had to go back into like old records and then look on the website, and they gave me a confirmation number, but I didn't even know what unit it was. It's a string of townhomes.
Oh.
And we're
Oh,
pulling
wow.
up there, and it's on the other side of the country from us. And we're like, which one of these is ours? No idea. I'm like hunting on a website on my phone because they never actually. Now, the confirmation number, if you put it in, you can find which. And so eventually I found it. But then we go to check in. Dude, there's none of this like code. Oh, by the way, we got there like 11 p.m. at night. I have to go drive back over to the office, which is at another location, get out, knock on a door, get a physical key, come back. This is not hard to put electronic locks on these things. I could tell you how much we paid for this ski in ski out townhome. They can afford to put an electronic lock on the dadgum door and send me the code, right? They're not out of cash for that. So they didn't. Physical key. Now, once we got in, that place was cleaned. It was fresh. Everything was, we've been in some spots where it's like, that doesn't look like the picture. Oh no, actually, this looked like the pictures. It was actually a little bit nicer than we were like, oh, check that out. And we didn't realize they had a loft up here. That wasn't in the picture. And it was this wonderful property. But honestly, like, they almost lost us in the process. And if we go back, I don't know, like, would we do that again?
I want to point out something here. Isn't it interesting how your expectations of them have been shaped by some of your other experiences, right? Like you've shown up at an Airbnb at 1 a.m. and you were still able to get in, right? And so you're like, I know this is possible. This is not hard. Why isn't it here? And so I think that's a really important angle to think about with this, is like, where do your ideal customers go?
Yes.
Where do they stay? What are their experiences like? Because that is setting the expectation bar for you, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah, and not just your industry, right? You're like,
oh no,
well, listen, none of my competitors have electronic locks on their doors. Like, what's the big deal? No. If they've seen it in another industry, they know it's possible, and that frames what they expect you to be able to deliver as well.
Right. Amazon next day delivery is everyone's problem.
Yeah, that's wrecking everybody's delivery plan. Yeah, you don't have free shipping. Like, what's that about, right? Like,
what do you mean it's going to take a week to get here? Like, that's ridiculous. Now, it's probably not ridiculous. There's probably a lot of good reasons why in your industry it takes a week to get there, but they don't care.
Yeah.
Right? Like that expectation has been set if they are the kind of person who buys a lot of things from Amazon.
Well, and this goes back to exactly what we talk about. When you're mapping out your customer profile here, you need to think about their life, not how they engage your product, how they live their life, because you're just one small slice of their overall life picture. And if all the other rest of parts of their life picture slant this way and you don't, it doesn't matter that none of your customers do either, your competitors do either. That their life is what we focus on, not, oh, well, this is so when we map their journey, early start is often things like problem happens in their life. How do they even know where to find out about me? I haven't shown up. I haven't delivered a sales pitch. They haven't bought anything. And we need to be paying attention to what experiences they're having. How do they even find out about us? How hard is it to get our info? I mean, the early awareness phase, then you get to the how do they test whether you're good or not? Do they look at reviews online? Do they talk to people? Does somebody show up? Then you get to the actual sales process. Because by the time they start a sales process with you, they have already had some experiences with your brand. We run across a lot of companies that have lost a big slice of their market before they even get to try the sales pitch. It's because they're not present where the problem is, or the way they show up doesn't match what these people are actually looking for. And so they rule you out before you don't even have a chance to sell them.
You're not even in the consideration set.
Yes.
All right. So if that's all confusing,
just a little bit,
let me drop a bomb on you. All right.
Bring it.
You can do this. And what we've been talking about is an instance where the buyer, the payer, and the user is the same person.
Mm-hmm.
However, there are a lot of industries where those are three different people.
Yes.
All right. The best example of this is when my admin would book my travel as part of my corporate role, right?
Yeah. Like you're going to visit a client, spend time
I'm
with
going
them.
to visit a client, right?
Yeah.
So my admin is the buyer.
Yeah.
She decides what airline I'm flying, what flight, etc. My company is the payer, and I'm the user. I'm the one who's actually on the airplane, right?
Right.
And so it's really, really important to sit down and think about your products and services. Who's the buyer, who's the payer, and who's the user? Because you have to understand the experience for all three of those.
Yeah. Yeah. A previous episode we had, and we was with Jack Hollis, who's vice president of North America for Toyota and works with a lot of the dealerships, right? And when you think about the world of dealerships, as that's fresh in my mind, that's pretty recent for us. Which, by the way, it's a great episode. If you guys haven't heard that one, go back and check that one out. Jack's awesome. There's a world of difference between the guy who's coming in to buy a Toyota for himself and the guy who's coming in to buy a Toyota for his teenager to drive.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
It's the same car. It's the same price. It's the same guy. Car. But now he's got the kinds of things that would tip him over the edge and be like, I got to get that. The buyer or the user, that one gap is different. Yeah, and you're right. It could stack on multiple levels. So maybe there were 2 of 3 or 1 of 3. It gets interesting. Okay, Daniel, this can feel overwhelming and complicated. Like, is this like you got to shut everything down? And what advice would you give to a leader who feels like I don't have the time or the technical skills, or like, how do you start? Where do you, if you got this tangled knot of yarn, ball of yarn to get into, where do you start pulling on that yarn to figure this out? How do we actually do this?
It's a good question. Isn't that why you and I have jobs, is to help people with this?
Hired Daniel.
I didn't think about that, but yes, 100%. One of the options is to say, I'm going to hire that guy. Heck yeah.
My contact information should be in the show notes. Call me.
It is. Yes. It is indeed. Steeringventures.com.
I would say if you want to try to tackle this on your own, I think you're going to need some time to think through this, right? So carving out some time and probably getting some of your key leaders involved would be helpful. Always hard to do, but always more valuable than people think it is to get 4 hours in a hotel conference room and just pound out some ideas, because it's very hard to get 4 hours of interrupted time, but some problems are big enough and important enough that they justify that.
Yeah.
I would start by looking at your best clients. Who are your favorite clients? Who are the people that you wish you could clone?
Yeah.
Good point.
And try to map out what their experience was. Why did they choose you? Why do they continue to choose you? Why do they refer you? And what are the touch points there? Because I think that's going to give you a really good starting point. I think then flip to the other side and say, what are some clients I've recently lost? What are some clients that I would never sign again? Right? Love them, but
glad we lost, right? Yeah.
Right. But if I knew then what I do now, I would not sign that contract.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes what will happen is, like, I saw this with a client once that I was working with. They were selling into hospitals, right? Hospitals are complex places to sell into. The buyer, they were selling technology into hospitals.
Oh, yeah.
The buyer was the medical director. The payer was the CFO, but the user was the head of IT. And so, and they were optimizing for the head of IT. So they would go in with a very IT-led sale.
A bunch of tech nerds would come go talk tech nerd. We'd all get excited.
And they would love each other, and they would have a love fest. And then the CFO And the head of, the medical director would be like, heck no. I have no idea why we're doing this. And they're like, but the technology is so cool. And so they needed to understand, why are they losing deals? And it's like, well, it's because you're not actually talking to the buyer. You're talking to the user. Or I've seen the flip, where we got a great relationship with the buyer. And so the executive team loves us, but the users, the people in the trenches actually using our product, they hate us. And then it becomes a really hard come renewal time to keep that relationship healthy when you've optimized for the buyer and you've neglected the user or any of the others, right? So I think that paradigm of buyer, payer, and user, once you get the first pass, probably the buyer is the first pass you need to think through. I would then go through the other two and just think of, is there anything really tragic in the way of those customer journeys? Because they're all your customer.
And I'll add an encouraging word. This is, when you just ask the right question, it gets pretty obvious. You don't have to be a PhD in psychology, and everyone, this is not like weird mental Jedi. You just get pretty straightforward stuff like, gee, what would a medical director care about? Did we ever talk about that part? Or do we just tell them how cool our tech is? Or all you have to do is maybe add to the conversation, here are the health outcomes that we've seen because you use our tool. It's not magic. You just, oh gosh, we don't even have anything about the health outcomes in our deck.
Or we never invited the medical director to the pitch.
Yeah, thank you. And just even more basic, we didn't even talk to that human.
We didn't even talk to her. And then there's a contract on the desk, and the medical director's like, what the heck is that? No, I have no idea what we're doing here.
You don't have to be a master Jedi judo here, black belt to pull this up. Just have a basic, like, oh, gee, that makes sense. And I will just confirm, when you think about your customers like in a bell curve, right? Maybe the biggest financial activities in the middle, that kind of average customer for you. But I think the best learnings are always on the edges. Your crazy raving fans that love you and why, and we went, and then maybe the raging fans. Like, boy, there's really
is that your next? That's your next book.
It's raging fans. Yeah. Well, we've got examples. We have got lots of examples. That part's not hard. Yeah. So,
all right, wait, hold on. I'm following here because I get like a little nerdy and like, wait, how do you do that? And so, because you've thrown a lot of great information out there, so you've got understand who your customer is. And I guess the reason why I want to recap real quick what we've discussed so far is because one thing Jack Hollis said that stood out to me in his conversation was, ask what your customer wants and give it to him. It's very matter of fact. He's like, it's that simple. And I'm sitting here thinking, says easy, does hard.
Oh, yeah.
How do you really understand what your customer wants? And so when I'm listening to you, Daniel, you're saying, okay, you've got to understand your customer and where to start. Think of your best so you can clone them. Think of your worst so you can avoid them. And then there's different layers: buyer, payer, user. So if you're going to say, like, would you recommend coming up with the buyer's journey and then maybe even having talking points for you and for maybe even that buyer to then say, hey, when you're talking to the guy or the gal who holds the purse, here's what they might want to know. And then start thinking about, because I come from a communication background. So now I'm thinking, like, how do you create one pagers of bullet point items of talking points?
I like this.
For yourself. And then what triggered this for me was a website that I went to on a training and delivery program. And so I'm a trainer, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love what they put together here. And then as I'm scrolling, they're like, do you need, like, here's your pitch to send to your boss to be able to present the value of this training material. And so now me as a facilitator and a trainer, I'm like, oh, if I now done, like, I see the value, but how do I articulate it? Like, okay, so talk to me about recommendations on how to speak to all three: buyer, payer, user.
So I would agree with, is it Jack? Was the guy?
Jack Hollis.
Jack Hollis. Totally agree with what he said. I just think you have to first understand who is your customer. Yes, ask them what they want, but you got to make sure you're asking the right person, because if you ask the payer, they will tell you they want cheapest. If you ask the user, they want easiest. But if you ask the buyer, they're probably the ones feeling the pain. Not always.
They want quality.
It depends on what you're selling, and it depends on who you're selling it to.
Yeah, but maybe effectiveness. Like, does this actually get me the thing out? Because the buyer in this model, the buyer is the decision maker who says that we pick that. And the person who has to make that decision is driven by something else behind it. Like, what's pushing them to pick
now, really good salespeople are very intuitive with this, right? They understand, and they're going to do, Caitlin, what you were just suggesting of, all right, we're having a good conversation. Who in your organization has the power to kill this, right? Who's got veto authority? Who do we need to get on board? Who's going to derail this once we say, once we sign the contract and then we go to implementation and this thing, becomes a dumpster fire? Who can help us prevent that, right? So they're building the relationships within larger, more complex organizations. These are more enterprise sales situations, not as much direct to consumer, right? Direct to consumer is easy, right? I'm the driver of my car. I need a full tank of gas. I am the buyer, the payer, and the user. Straightforward. You move into B2B, larger enterprises, a lot of very complex dynamics. And so something like a checklist or a sell sheet that says, here's how we sell, here's how to communicate the value of what we do to the CFO, to the CMO, to the medical director, because you know that you've got to get all those people on board to actually get the deal done and to execute it successfully.
Okay, that's super helpful.
But I would usually start with the buyer and then see if the buyer is willing to help you navigate the organization and get the other players involved.
Yeah, that's a really good pro tip, because if the buyer picks you, then now they're on the team with you to say, who else do we need to talk to? And they'll often tell you, level one is you should have something generic. And we'll often not just have a talking sheet. Sometimes, Caitlin, we'll even put together, you've seen these for clients. We've done the ideal customer profile with like a picture. We'll take like a stock photo and be like, there she is in her 3-piece suit and carrying her briefcase with her laptop. And like, there's Susie, marketing executive or whatever, right? And we'll like, that's who we're selling to, right? But man, that's level one. Level two is if you can get a buyer as an advocate on your side, they'll be like, no. Our Susie is a high C who wants all the details. Like, forget your standard sheet. I know exactly what our Susie cares about. And that gets really, that's the ultimate setup, is like, start with something to get you in the door. If the buyer says, man, I love these guys, then I've tailored to specific individuals and be like, this guy's really into football. We're going to use a football analogy to explain why this is going to help his company.
Okay, this makes so much sense, because I'm going back to, okay, we're designing a customer journey, and identify your customer, get to know their personalities. You can use DISC assessment to kind of narrow it down. And then as we're mind mapping those touch points with our customer in mind and their personality styles, I almost feel like, okay, start first with the buyer. And then as you're thinking, like, bullet point, okay, a couple talking points for the payer, a couple talking points for the user at this point. Like, I'm thinking of, I'm a leader in an organization that really wants to get my team together in that hotel conference room. What do I do? What's the outcome? So I'd say and I'm pulling from what you had said, get to know your customer, get their personality types, build out that journey for the buyer, and then have many sub points underneath about the user and the payer, because we don't want to forget about them. We love them too. But then at the end of that conference, you've got a solid journey for the buyer with ideas of how to address payer and user.
Yeah. I would say the other recommendation here would be think 80-20, right? 20% of the process is going to work for 80% of the people. Don't try to solve for every use case. 80% of the people are going to follow 20% of the process. Nail that, and then start working on the edge cases.
Love that. Mm-hmm.
And then once you have that, maybe the last thing I'll share, personal example. I'm a self-professed meathead doing CrossFit. There's a brand of shorts that I really like, but they're very niche to the CrossFit community. And I was on their website earlier today looking for a pair of shorts that I want to buy with my birthday money. And they didn't have everything I wanted. And so I didn't buy it. I get an email an hour later, and the title of the email is, "Do you need a spot?" And it's
if you're not into the lifting world, like a spot is, hey, I'm going to
help, right? Yeah.
Right. I'm going to spot you so you don't hurt yourself. So it's very much insider lingo.
Yeah.
But they offered me like a 10% coupon off the thing that was left in my shopping cart.
How
and you're just like, brilliant. Like, you know me, you know my language, you know my people, and you saw my behavior that I was, looking at these shorts and didn't follow through on buying. And now that is spot on customer experience.
That is a great example to explain the journey and the touch points and getting to know who you're targeting and why.
Yeah. Yeah. They do a fantastic job.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It may be a bunch of work, but this is often the difference between good and great. If you're just surviving, maybe, but if you get any margin, this is really what unlocks going to the next level. Do you really know your customers? Hey, Daniel, thanks for digging into this. Man, good stuff. You did well. I put you on the spot. You managed to pull it off.
Hey, man, I'm just glad you didn't start a nuclear war while we're recording.
That's exactly right. Hey, for all we know, we did, and I cut that part out, right? Because consequences.
That's true.
Consequences.
But now we've got to get rid of Caitlin because she's a liability.
That's exactly. They'll know if we did it, whether she shows up on the next episode or not.
Yeah, she's a loose end, and we've got to tie up that loose end. Sorry, Caitlin. It was great working with you.
I know. It was nice knowing you guys.
Oh, man. All right. Well, tune in next time to see if Caitlin survives. Talk to you guys later.
To be continued.
Thanks for spending some time with us on your journey to legendary. If you enjoyed this episode and want more content like this, you may want to sign up for our newsletter. You can do that and learn about all the ways we are helping leaders build legendary brands at swazconsulting.com. That's www.swozconsulting.com. Greatness is possible. You just have to build the right engine.